film is the story of the Ulster Home Guard and the part they played in the defence of Great Britain. By 1940, Northern Ireland had become the strategic base which guarded the last remaining lifeline from Great Britain to the outside world. The possession of this base by enemy or neutral would have spelt defeat. This is the country where these men live. This is the land they were resolved to defend against any attack the Germans might make. They were part of the Ulster war effort which gained this tribute from Mr. Churchill. In 1939, German plans and preparations were complete. Every effort to prevent war had failed, and the British Commonwealth of Nations, peace-loving and unprepared, were defending freedom against the most formidable aggressor the world had ever seen. By 1940, the German victories in northern France had brought their armies to the very frontiers of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and only these islands stood between them and world domination. Eden called for local defense volunteers to supplement the regular forces, and in every city, town and village, the response was immediate. Thousands of men from every walk of life came forward. After each party had been sworn in, a rifle and 100 rounds of ammunition were issued to each man, and training under sergeant instructors of the Ulster Special Constabulary began immediately. Soon these men were on the range, learning to use their rifles to the best effect. Factories on important war work and utilities were directed to provide against saboteurs. Home guards employed in the factories were organized for this duty, and at the end of each day's work manned their posts and guarded their factory until the next day's work began. Another operational task assigned to the Ulster Home Guard was a check on all traffic. Roadblocks were manned and identity cards checked. A watch for parachute troops was ordered, and observation posts were organized all over Northern Ireland. In many cases, shelter had to be improvised. Sentries kept watch from dusk till dawn. At this time, a form of black denim uniform had been issued to the force. Greatcoats were not yet available, but thousands of ground sheets were purchased and issued. The Ulster Home Guard were fortunate not only in having a rifle for each man, but also in the number of Lewis guns which were available. Eventually, each company had at least two, and companies allotted to aerodrome defense and other important roles had many more. A number of military officers and NCOs were allotted to assist with trading. grenades and cup discharges were issued and training carried out. By this time, supplies of battle dress had become available and were issued to all Home Guard. Every officer and man in the pulse grenade. The most powerful weapon in general use was the spigot mortar. This weapon had two outstanding characteristics. It was easy to learn and in the hands of trained personnel was extremely accurate. It was especially effective in its anti-personnel role. When proficiency had been reached in each weapon, field firing was carried out. The direction and control of the fire of the various weapons were combined, and practice with live ammunition was carried out in a tactical setting. A large number of wireless sets were issued, and no section of the force was more efficient and keen than the signals. As part of the long-range intercommunication scheme of Northern Ireland, an extensive and complete pigeon service was established and proved its value on many signal exercises. The demand for manpower resulted in a request for Home Guards to under a considerable part of the Ack defence of Northern Ireland. A large number of Ulster Home Guard were allotted to the Ack defence of Belfast and Londonderry. Intensive training under Ack instructors was carried out with enthusiasm. Later, live practice with towed targets brought them to the required standard. They then became part of Ack Command. Every night after their day's work was done, they slept on the gun sites ready to defend their city, which already wore the scars of enemy attack. Their special pride was the Ack sign, the black bow and arrow on a red ground, which they were now entitled to wear. Armaments for the defence of specially important military objectives in Northern Ireland included 75mm and 25-pounder field guns. A large number of these were manned by Ulster Home Guard. Training was intensive, and in light on the anti-tank ranges, a very high degree of accuracy was reached. every weekend, meals had to be provided for Home Guards who in Ireland, the WVS, were always of the greatest assistance when called upon. A feature of the German victories in Europe had been the swift and deep penetration of mechanized columns. The Ulster Home Guard were determined that this would not happen here. Suitable ambush sites were chosen, organized and tested with tactical exercises. In many of these exercises, the regular army provided the enemy. Much experience was gained and many useful lessons were learned in this way. In this battle, the enemy column has been delayed and has suffered casualties. And with similar ambushes waiting for him every few miles, his progress in Northern Ireland will be slow and painful. By D-Day, the civilians of 1940 had become the Ulster Home Guard of 1944 and were able to undertake the defense of their country against any counterstroke the Germans might make. The victories in northern France, Belgium and Holland removed the probability of the Germans making such a counterstroke, and it was decided that the Home Guard would stand down and go into reserve on the 3rd of December 1944. On this date, ceremonial parades were held and ended in a march past. In Belfast, the troops were addressed by the commander, Belfast Sub-District. Later, the salute was taken by the Governor of Northern Ireland. In preparation for the stand-down parade in London, men from every battalion were assembled in Victoria Barracks and formed a contingent of 3 officers and 105 other ranks, which took their place among Home Guard contingents from all over Great Britain at the march past in Hyde Park, where the salute was taken by His Majesty the King.